Hello, Atmore. It's the Lloyd and Friends Show. And now here's your host, Lloyd Alberton.
And here we are, back again with you with the Lloyd and Friends Show. This is Lloyd Albriton, and I would remind you that we're broadcasting live at WGYJ-LP radio station right here in Atmore, 93.5 FM. This is a small band nonprofit station, so those of you in Atmore are probably able to pick us up nice and clear. If you have friends outside of Atmore, however, they can pick us up also live streaming on the internet. All you got to do is just go to the internet, go to www.light, L-I-G-H-T, light935fm.com, and that'll take you to our website. And just down at the bottom of the page, you'll see a live link. You can just check in there and listen to us live. Now, for those of you who missed the interview, we're archiving the interviews on YouTube. So all you got to do for that is just go to Lloyd and Friends, Lloyd and A-N-D. Don't use the symbol, use the A-N-D. Lloyd and Friends on YouTube, and just look for the interviews. They're all posted there. So if you happen to miss one of our conversations, I'd rather call them than interviews, why, go there and pick it up. And tell your friends about it. And don't forget to like the channel and share it. Okay? Again, I'm talking this morning with an old friend of mine. We used to ride the school bus together. Went to school together from first grade all the way up through the 12th. And we've remained friends all through the years. I'm talking about Paul Hollingsworth. Now, we have a lot of folks from Atmore. Paul and I kind of grew up a little outside of Atmore, out in a little rural timber and farm community called Nokomis. If you're a Yankee, you might call it Nokomis. But Paul and I call it Nokomis, and in those days it was kind of a unique way of growing up out there. The roads are all paved now, and it's where all the well-to-do folks want to live, isn't it, Paul?
That's right.
A lot of nice houses, and the roads are all paved, but in our day, it's where all the poor people lived, kind of. And we had a very unique way of living. So I'm talking to Paul Hollingsworth. Paul, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family and who you are.
Well, good morning to everyone, and to you, Lloyd. Thank you for having me on and thinking about the good old days of when we used to run those dirt roads that you're talking about. And not only did we run them, we played football in them and chased one another and had the best time in the world. And then when a car would come by, we'd all hit the ditch and then all of a sudden be right back out. So you can tell the traffic wasn't all that heavy when we could play in the middle of the dirt roads. So yes, it's a pleasure to be with you and see you again, Lloyd. If you want to talk about me, yes, I was one of the number of boys that was born about the same time in the little community that we love to call Nokomis.
1947? You were born in 47?
1947, yeah. We're kind of getting old, aren't we? But I was the baby of my family. I had two brothers and a sister, and my dad was Jake Hollingsworth, and he was a farmer and drove the school bus. My mom was Bessie Joyner Hollingsworth, and I was really blessed to be raised in a wonderful family with the most wonderful mom and the most wonderful dad that anybody could have. In those days, family was important, and my dad made sure that I did right because he was a pretty good disciplinarian, and my mom was just a sweet, loving mother of the wonderful days of that era when you really enjoyed the love that they gave you and the switches and all of the corrections. And if it hadn't been for Lloyd getting me in trouble all the time,
You never got a whipping, would you?
I probably wouldn't. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, that's kind of where, and um, kind of interesting. You ask about my family. Um, my mother came from a family of 12. Um, she had 11 siblings.
She was a joiner.
She,
Join or Joyn?
Joiner.
Joiner.
Yeah,
Okay.
she was a joiner from Dry Springs. Um, and my dad came from a family of 10. There were 10 children in his family. And what's kind of interesting about my dad's family is there was 4 boys that was born. They were the oldest, and then those 4 boys was followed by 6 girls. So I always found that kind of interesting. And I remember my dad talking about when the Depression hit. At times were extremely tough at that time. That my granddaddy told the 4 boys, "Hey, y'all got to get out on your own. I can't feed all these mouths, and I got all these girls I got to take care of." So
Now, the 4 boys and the 6 girls. You're talking about your You're talking about your father's siblings.
that's right.
Okay, because I couldn't remember that many girls. Okay.
Yeah, on my dad's side. Yeah, there was 10, and it was all. I just found it unusual that'd be 4 boys born first, and then followed by 6 girls. So, and I had a wonderful sister. Her name was Thelma. We called her Sis. Most everybody knew her as Sis. She worked for the telephone company for probably about 40 years and retired and then passed away a few years ago.
Lots of people in that more than Selma.
Right. She was well known in the area. I can remember when she started working for the telephone company with Mr. Corman, and there wasn't many people then. It was the old phones with the party lines, and you pick up the phone, and the operator would ask you number, please. Well, she was the one that was saying number, please, and she watched that telephone company grow from a small little, when we had the party lines, and you had to wait till somebody else got off the party line before you could use the phone. You remember those days, Lloyd?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That way. I think my sister probably knew everything was going on in town. I don't know how much she eavesdropped and listened in. I don't know. But anyway, that's what she did. And I had my oldest brother. His name was Eldred, and we called him Holly. He was known far and wide by Holly, probably more than Eldred. And he worked at Monsanto, Chemstrand back in those days. And he also has passed away. And then my other brother's Dwayne. He's a farmer, and he lives in Enon.
Dwayne's he's retired from farming now, or is he still?
Yeah,
farming?
he's still
fiddling.
He's got some cows. I think he plays with. I don't know.
Okay.
Give him something to do, I guess. So.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it. I was really blessed to be able to be brought up and raised and influenced. I tell people a lot of times that I learned a lot from mom and dad and my brothers and my sister, but probably I learned the most about life from my friends, the boys, and Lloyd, you're one of them, Eddie and Jim and Van. We all just kind of ran around together, and I picked up a lot of things about life from all of those friends that we developed. And I was raised, I was an educator for my occupation, I guess you'd say, and I just cherish those days because I see so many children that come through that really didn't have the opportunity to have all those friends to run around with and to learn from, and I always feel blessed with that.
I guess it was. We're part of that big baby boomer generation,
right?
And there was a lot of us. It seemed like in Nokomis, you and I growing up over there. There are a lot of our fathers. They grew up together. They were all
Right.
grew up in that Nokomis area. And they came back from the war, and it just seemed like there was a proliferation
Yeah.
of kids.
Yeah.
We had a lot of kids.
I
that
wonder
never
what
know-
happened, huh?
I guess they were all just horny or something.
You
Whatever.
said that, not me.
I said it. I said it. Well, it's a reality. They came back and they started putting babies on the ground, and a lot of them were boys. We had a few girls
Yeah.
over in Nokomis,
Yeah.
but seemed like it was mostly boys.
Yeah.
Me, you, Jim Lee, Eddie Seals, and then some of the older boys that was a little older than us, Leroy Tellis, Leon,
Right.
some of those older boys. But one thing that I always mention to people about my growing up is that we had a lot of experiences going to school together from the 1st to the 12th grade, old friends, but it took us an hour to get to school.
Yeah.
We lived way out there, and the bus had to go winding around here and there and picking up kids, and it took us an hour to get to school and an hour
Sure
to get
did.
home every day. So that's
That's
2
right.
hours a day we spent on that bus, and those were, to me, probably as influential a time as at the schoolhouse.
Amen. That's
We
correct.
had a lot of good
That's
times
correct.
on that bus.
Learned a lot. It's got a lot of life experiences right there on that school bus. Sure
Sometimes we'd just sit and talk for that whole hour
Yeah.
on the way to school and back. Sometimes we'd slap one another behind the head and play games and get a little roughhousing, going on. Your dad was the bus driver all the years that I went to school, and I'm sure yours
Right.
as well. And he
That's
was
correct.
he was a character. He let us get away with a lot of stuff, except when
Yeah,
he'd
he
get
did.
mad.
He
Sometimes
did.
he'd get mad. Now,
Yeah. Now, when he
get
got
down.
mad, you better pay attention.
He'd quiet down. But we were kind of known as the roughest bus in the county, actually, because we just would cut up. I'll never forget the time somebody threw an orange peel out the window and it hit one of the teachers' cars as they were passing, and that came back to the schoolhouse, and of course they jumped on Mr. Jake about it, his bus being so
Right,
rowdy, and
right.
he didn't like that. It took us about 3 hours to get home that day because every time he'd think of something new, he'd stop the bus, and he had that old floor shift on the bus, and he'd think of something else he wanted to tell us, and so he would stop the bus and he'd let out on the clutch as he got up, and the bus would kind of lurch forward a little bit. You know how it does.
Got your
with-
attention.
Yeah, and everybody would like fall down, and he'd
Yeah,
get up.
I remember that.
And he
Sure
would
do.
he would lecture to us a little bit, and preach to us. I'd call it. He'd give us a good sermon.
Yeah.
And then
I got a lot of those.
Now, you told me a story one time, Paul, about your dad making you work through lunch one time. There was one thing you asked him, and he said that he probably was a little too hard on you that time. You remember that story?
Yeah, probably so. I probably did something, and that was his way of punishment for me. Yeah,
But you never felt. I'll say this about my father. My father was a kind of a disciplinarian. He didn't read any psychology books. He just did what he felt like. If he felt like whipping all of us, he did.
Of course, that was what my dad was.
But I never felt unloved. That was one thing I can say. I never even, as I got older, felt that my parents did not love me. I always knew they loved me. I'd get mad with my dad, but I always knew that they loved me, even though they did maybe were unfair a time or two.
Yeah, I was, as I said earlier, the older you get, the more you appreciate exactly what your parents did and how they raised. And of course, as you said, they didn't have any formal training. They just did what the good Lord had given them in their minds to do. And my dad was a very unique, special person. As growing up, I couldn't see it that it was all that special. I thought he was pretty tough. He was tough on us. He demanded that we do the right thing, and he demanded that we work. He did make us work, and we worked hard. I can remember many times when we were in the field working, and I would see friends that were out riding around or going places, doing things, and I was, of course, jealous, wanting to know, why I couldn't do it. Why am I out here picking cotton or picking cucumbers or pulling corn, shelling corn, feeding the cows, whatever's always there. So he certainly taught us, how to work, and at that time I probably didn't appreciate it like that in later life when I look back to see. And the thing that really is, as you stated, he really, I didn't realize how much he really loved us until I got old enough to look to see what he meant by it. And my mom was always there to take care of us, so it was a good balancing act.
I remember many times Mr. Jake would put you and Dwayne, and of course Holly was a little older than us. He graduated like at 57 or something like that.
Right.
And we graduated in 1965. But I remember many times Mr. Jake would let you boys would stop after he got over into the Nokomis area, and you'd get off the bus and get right on the tractor.
Right.
And be plowing the field or doing
He always had work waiting for us when we got home from school.
Yeah. And I do remember that a lot of times us boys would be going to the creek or something, and I'd see you guys. I felt so. I was a poor Paul out there plowing.
Yeah.
Or Dwayne always out there working instead of.
Thank you for thinking of me.
I thought of you.
I didn't realize it at that time. I was thinking, oh, look at them, man! They going to the creek to swim, or are they going in? Oh, and I'm down here on my knees trying to pick these old cucumbers. I said, growing up, I said, if I ever got to be a grown man and I had something of my own, there'd be one thing that wouldn't be on my place, and that'd be a cucumber.
Do you eat cucumbers now?
Oh, yeah, and I still, I went back on the word because I do have a garden
I
every year.
remember picking some cucumbers as a kid. I think it was like a nickel a pay. It's like
bucket,
a 5-gallon bucket,
Yeah.
nickel a bucket. And
You pick up a rock and put it in your pocket to count them too.
Yeah, yeah. And picking cotton, that's something that a lot of people in our generation have never done. I appreciate the fact that I lived in a farm. My father wasn't a farmer, but, your dad planted some cotton, and my cousin Dewey Hollingsworth, planted cotton. And, there's some of the farmers that would let us young kids come out and pick some cotton, and it was quite an experience. I don't think I ever got over 100 pounds as a kid, but some of them good pickers could pick 300 or 400 pounds.
That's exactly right. I picked a mini bowl of cotton, and if I could get 100 pounds, I felt like I had a very successful day. But I'd watch those people in the fields that could pick 200 and 300 pounds a day. I tell a story I used to tell my students when I was teaching all about cotton picking and how we'd pick them, and I'd always tell about Junior Gibson. He was the fastest picker of them all, and he could get 300 pounds every day he went out there, and it always amazed me, and I look back on it, it still amazes me as to how people can do different things differently. They're good with their hands, and Junior apparently knew how to use both hands and how to put it in that sack. You put the sack over your shoulders and drag it down the row, and
had a little leather or something on the bottom of it where it wouldn't wear a hole in it.
Yeah.
But it was about 10
and the
feet
good
long.
pickers could carry 2 rows, and Junior could pick 2 rows at a time.
Yeah.
And us slow pickers, we wasted a lot of time going from one row back and forth, and forth. But Junior had mastered the act of getting 2 rows at a time, and then getting it in that sack. I looking back on it, you realize how important it is to be.
He had 1 sack or 2 sacks?
No, he'd have 1.
1 sack. Yeah. Well, it started to get full. It started to tire you out dragging it. When I was just a little boy then, I always get behind, and that's when it really got lonely. When they all leave you behind. That's when you wanted to lay down between the rows and go to sleep.
Yeah.
But I've seen movies where
That's pretty neat. I'd forgotten about that, Lloyd.
Yeah.
The guy that was behind was ridiculed, wasn't he?
Yeah. I've seen movies where they depicted people picking cotton, and they would just have stuff wrapped around their hand, and their hands would be
Yeah.
bleeding. I never saw that.
No.
I mean, they would stick you. They had that little bowl that was like a
That
little
burr,
needle,
that burr would
4
get
of
you.
them there,
Yeah.
and you had to be careful. But I never saw anybody with their hands bleeding. They just had good finger dexterity, and they could go. And singing in the cotton patch. Now I saw that.
Oh yeah.
They would do that. It was a long, dreary day out there picking that cotton, and wanted to get to singing and. In the cotton wagon, as they would haul the workers back and forth, they loved to sing, and that was a interesting part of my life that you and I got to see. That a lot of people today only see that in the movies, but we actually saw it.
Yeah. Oh,
And it was a lot of fun.
I tell this sometimes. You know, we would pick cotton all day. And then, of course, it was my dad's cotton, so we would load it on the trailer, and you'd weigh it and keep it up. And Dad always paid up every day. Whenever he's pickers, he was a firm believer in paying at the end of the day. And so when you get through, and
as I remember, it was about $3 a hundred or $4 a hundred.
Yeah. He had a little book,
paying.
and it'd be all he had to do was look at the table, and if he was paying 3 cents a pound or 2 cents a pound, ever what he was paying, he could figure out how much money it was. But he'd pay up, and then he'd say, "All right, boys, everybody go home with the pickers," and he'd tell us, "All right, boys, we got to get this cotton to the gin." So we'd load the trailer up to the truck, old pickup truck, and we'd head off to Curry's Gin. And he always put me, by that time it got dark because we worked at the end of the day.
Right.
So he put me up on top of that trailer load of cotton, and he handed me a flashlight. And didn't have any lights on the trailer, so he handed me that flashlight, and I'd ride up on top of the trailer. And I was a baby, so I guess I was the one that was chosen to do that. So, and he gave me a little red. He had a little red handkerchief. Those days people had those red handkerchiefs that they carried around, bandanas, whatever you want to call them. But he handed me one of those and flashlight, and he says, "Now, if a car comes up behind you, you lean over, turn that flashlight on, put that handkerchief over, and then just hold it there. But now, when he passed, you turn that flashlight off because you got to save my batteries. You can't let it go."
Save my batteries.
So that was my job, to ride on the trailer and hold the flashlight down for the taillight purposes. So, and then we'd go take it up there and line up. In those days, you had to line up. You'd go up there and get a number and line up and wait till sometimes it'd be midnight before you got your turn to get the cotton gin, and then take it back home. He never made me ride it on the way back. I guess we were always so late he wasn't worried about the police getting him. So, but I always found that interesting.
Well, that's a unique experience. Now, Paul, you started your school years out here at Davisville in the first grade.
Yeah.
We didn't have preschool in those days. We just started right in the
First
first grade. And I guess what was the date of your birthday?
I was a July boy.
You were July. Now, I don't know how they do it nowadays, but in those days, if your birthday was after January the 1st, you had to wait until the next year.
Yeah.
So you were what age when you started? 6 or 7? You were probably, or 5.
I think I was 6.
6.
See,
okay.
I just turned 6 in July, and then
Right.
school started in September.
Okay. In any event, you and I went to school together from the 1st through the 6th grade, and then we
At Davisville.
At Davisville, and then in the 7th grade we transferred over to the big school up to Walnut Hill.
All the way to Ernest Ward High School.
That was a big social move in our day.
It was, wasn't it?
Moving up to the high school, and we went over there in the 7th grade and finished up in the 12th grade. Well, and you ultimately became an educator. You had some influences in your life in education that kind of influenced you in that direction. What are some of your memories of Davisville, going to school over there?
Mainly, well, the teachers are always there. Mr. Horton, he was the principal and the 6th grade teacher, and he was a unique person. And we had Miss Copeland, Miss McGill, and
Miss Barron.
Miss Barron. Those But probably most time is everything else. You remember the playground when we'd go to recess, and I remember Mr. Horton saying one time that at Davisville School, he rang the bell he had a little button that he'd ring the bell to end things. And he says, y'all got to appreciate being here at Davisville. Said, I'll let y'all stay out an extra 10 minutes or something. When he would want to do it, he said, I just choose to ring the bells when I think. Now, when you go to Ernest Ward, you can't do that because the bells are set on a timer and it's going to ring at a certain time. And it's funny how I remember that, but I remember him telling us about it. And so, Davisville was certainly a little small elementary school with one grade in each or one class for each grade, which was the same way it was when I was teaching at Somerdale and I was principal at Somerdale School. We had one room for each grade, and I didn't realize it when I was at Davisville, but after I got involved in education and being involved in school, Somerdale kind of got crowded, and my first grade teacher, her name Miss Holmes, it didn't matter how many was in the class. If someone came in and they were in the first grade, well, it had to go to the first grade teacher, Miss Holmes. And I can remember taking one student down there in the middle of the year, and I walked in, I said, Miss Holmes, we've got another first grader here, and I really do hate to have to put him in here, but this is number 45 for you. So she had 45 first graders, and but her attitude, oh, Miss Hollingsworth, that's fine, bring him right on in. That's just and that's the way teachers were in those days, and that still are. We have great teachers.
There were some wonderful teachers. Now back to Mr. Horton for just a minute. He was quite a good coach too. He used to go out and hit the ball to us. He'd hit us flies and we'd catch them.
Yeah, he'd play with us.
We had a championship 4-H club basketball team.
Yeah.
We used to go out there and practice on those dirt courts. Mr. Horton would teach us the moves and the plays, and we beat everybody. We played Molino and Walnut Hill and Brad, and
those were wonderful
he really taught
days.
us basketball. That little team, he'd take us to the games in his car. And, I think he had a little 53 Ford he used to drive. But
That's
he'd
right.
Take us to the
That's
games.
where we got to go.
That's how we went to the games. But there was you and me and Eddie Seals and Jim Lee and Guy Dennis.
Yeah.
I think that was the 5. And then Johnny Godwin was our manager. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember that.
But,
that's right.
Paul and Eddie, you were, what's the ones out front?
The guards.
You were guards. They
Yeah.
were guards. And you guys just won all the games. Now, I never could ring the goal. All I did was mostly get in the way. But Paul was quite a basketball player. Now, what do you remember about your athletic day? I mean, you loved basketball, and you were really good at it. Paul could dribble that ball, and you couldn't hardly get it away from him.
Yeah, I enjoyed basketball. I wasn't big enough for football like you. You say that basketball, I guess was my forte, and I did like and enjoyed playing the 4-H basketball was a wonderful experience.
Yeah,
it's amazing how I look back on it, how much we learned and how much fun and it was so important to us because that was the thing that we could hang our hat on, so to speak. And I just remembered Guy Dennis, who turned out to be a wonderful success story of going and playing football for the University of Florida. But Guy was so unselfish, he never would go to the offensive side. He'd just stay on the defensive side and get the rebound because he was so tall and big and throw it out to us. And Eddie and I got the privilege of dribbling it down and having a layup on the fast break. But and then I went on and played basketball in high school, and
you did.
We did pretty good. But I remember you playing ball too. You were a pretty good running back on the high school football team.
Well,
and we'd be cheering on that Lloyd Albritton. Look at those crazy legs running out there, going out on the sweep.
Well, I thought that was the only way I could get a girl was play football, but I never was that good at it. But Anyway, I played from the 7th grade, and I was happy about when I went out for football in 7th grade. I think all of us went out for football in 7th
We
grade.
did. I think we all did.
And many decided after one day of Carl Madison that it really wasn't for them. But I was thankful to have Carl Madison in that 7th grade, and then he moved on to bigger schools and bigger things. And Joe Latham came in at in our 8th grade year and was there until I finished school. And he was a wonderful influence as well.
He was a great influence.
He was kind of a father figure, and
he was.
mentored a lot of boys.
He did.
It was kind of a funny thing. When I graduated school and went off in the service and had my children, and later moved back to the area, and then my kids were going to junior high school. Well, Joe Latham was still there. And the boys all, times had changed. And some of the boys, they said, Mr. Latham, I don't know if his mind, he calls all of us by our daddy's names. He called my son Lloyd. he said, Ronnie said, he said, Ronnie, get over here. Or Leroy Ellis, Leroy Bodie. He'd call them all by their daddy's names.
Yeah.
So, well, you don't have to be crazy to do that, because I kind of do that myself nowadays. Of course, I may be crazy. I don't know. But, it was kind of funny that he had been around so long that he would do that. But he was a wonderful influence.
That's funny you say that, because I remember personal experiences of when I got old enough that I was teaching the children of the kids that I already taught. I would refer. You can remember the dads or the moms a lot more than you can relate to them, because it's such memories you had, going through that. So. Yeah, I could relate to the coach doing that.
Well, moving on into high school years, who were some of your favorites there? I know you mentioned at some time or other to me that Mr. Wayne McKay, had been an influence upon you deciding to be a school teacher, which you did.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting story. He was the basketball coach. And he was our math teacher in junior high. Mm-hmm. And I actually, when I started teaching, I would remember and use some of the things that he used. He used to, have his little square there that he'd put us in, and he'd have that paddle there, and he'd hit that desk and get everybody's attention. And Mr. Coach Wayne McKay was probably the most influential person, other than my mom and dad and friend, that I've had in my life. And he's kind of the one that, directed me toward what I ultimately wound up doing in my career as a school teacher. And just kind of to let you know the influence that he had on me, my senior year, I had no desire to go to college. I wasn't that good of a student, and college wasn't even a thought. I was just going to hopefully get out of high school and go get me a job at chemistry where my brother worked, and hopefully buy a car. And that was about the only.
You could think.
That's about the only goals I had. And then again, you got to know my dad, and my dad drove the bus, so about Christmas time, middle of the year, my dad came up to me and he says, I'll try to tell it kind of the way it went. He said, Paul, where do you want to go to college? I said, Dad, I don't want to go to college. And
none of your other siblings had been to college?
No, nobody in my family had been to college. I mean, we were poor, and nobody thought about any of us going to college. I know I didn't. So my dad asked me, he said, where do you want to go to college? And my answer was, Dad, I don't want to go to college. I'm not going to college. And his answer was, he said, I didn't ask you if you wanted to go. I asked you, where did you want to go? And I said, I have no idea, Dad. I don't know. So he said, well, figure out where you want to go, and that's what you're going to do. So I went to Coach McKay. I went back to school. I went to Coach McKay. Now, you got to understand, I wasn't a good student. I didn't I didn't make good grades like you did. And
No. Well, that's not that. Don't believe a word of that.
so
You did well.
My grades were not very good or all that good. It was enough to get by, I guess.
Well, that's kind of where I was. I was a C student, pretty steady.
So I went up. I found Coach McKay, Coach Wayne McKay, and I went up to. I said, Coach McKay, can I talk to you a minute? And he said, sure. I said, I got a problem. He said, oh, you do? I said, what's your problem? And he said, I told him, I said, well, my dad told me last night that I have got to go to college, and I don't know where I'm going to go or what I'm going to do. He wants to know where I want to go. And I can remember Coach McKay looking at me, and he says, Paul, you really do have a problem. Because he knew I would probably have a hard time making it in college. So he sat there and thought a little bit, and he says, you know what? He said, I know a little old junior college up in central Mississippi that you might make it. And I would recommend if you're going to go to college, you go there. I said, okay, what's the name of it? He says, it's East Central Junior College in Decatur, Mississippi. I said, okay, that's where I'm going to college. So I went back home, told my dad, I said, I know where I want to go to college. And I told him East Central. He said, okay, that's where you're going. And so that's how I wound up going to college. And just to add to it a little bit, when I went and registered to enroll, the dean of admission, at that time you had to line up and go down the table, and they took one after the other. And he comes up there, and I walk in front of him, and he looks up at me and says, Hollingsworth. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm here to go to college. And he looks at my transcript, and he says, boy, what in the world are you doing coming here trying to go to college? He says, you'll never make it. I said, look at this transcript. And I told him, I said, sir, you let me in, and I'll make it, because my daddy told me I had to go to college. And he says, well, I tell you what, I'll let you in on probation, but all you do is wasting your daddy's money. So
really, he told you that?
That's what he told me. That's exact words. He looked at it, he says, I can't let you in except under probation, and that's pretty low to get in probation at junior college. So, yeah, he said, I'll let you in, but all you do is wasting your daddy's money. And I was lucky to make it, and
were you offended by that, or you're humble enough?
No, I think it was a challenge. I think because my response to him was, and I've looked at it and I've thought about, that was pretty good, because I told him, I said, hey, you just let me in, and I'll make it. And I kind of think it gave me that little bit of encouragement to study hard, and I did have to study, and I did have to work. And I wound up graduating from Southern Mississippi on the dean's list. So, but I'd have never done that without Coach McKay. That's just one of the things. It goes back to what we were talking about. He understood us. He understood his students, and he knew me, and he felt like it. And because of him, I was directed to go and wound up with a college education. I chose to be a teacher, kind of like, it was just, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I always enjoyed history and political science, and, all that was always interesting me. And so I got a degree in business administration, and also I got a minor in education. And when I got out of college, I was able to find a job teaching, and that's kind of where it went.
That was over in Summerdale?
Yeah.
Robertsdale
yeah,
area?
Summerdale,
Okay.
yeah. And
that was
most enjoyable time. Lord, I've had the most wonderful career. You would have never thought when I was in high school that I'd wind up being a school teacher. But what's so amazing about it is the enjoyment of teaching, the enjoyment of students. I was fortunate that I was able to get into administration, but my true love was teaching and being with the students. I would have stayed as a teacher and not gotten into administration. The pay would have been the same, but I felt like I needed to. They offered me the principal's position, and
So
I said, "Why not take it? It's more money, of course.
Yeah,
it's all about money."
So you taught for how many years before you went into administration?
I taught for 7 years.
7 years, and then you became an assistant principal, or you became
No, I became principal
at the middle
Somerdale School.
At Somerdale School.
It was a junior high school.
Oh, then later you were an assistant
And then
principal at the high
and
school.
then later they talked me into leaving Somerdale School and going to Robertsdale High School, where I served there as administrator, principal, assistant principal, and I also was principal of our what we call our night school program, where students could come in at nighttime and finish up credits that they were behind on or whatever. So, yeah, I served in an administrative position in a number of ways.
Did you enjoy the middle school better or worse than the high school level?
Yeah, I enjoyed.
Because I know that middle school is tough.
The most fun was middle school because they're more challenging, and they're more influential, and you just could have more fun with them. And I just enjoyed the camaraderie that you can develop with the middle school age.
Did you do some coaching there as well?
I was a coach. I coached all of the sports at junior high school. Yeah, basketball, track, softball. We didn't have football. We were too small to have it there. And of course, when I got to Robertsdale High School, there was a time that we were in transition of the head coach, and I took over the head coaching job. That was probably the most challenging times I ever had, was trying to be a head football coach.
That was while you were still assistant principal as well.
Yeah, at high school, I served as a coach 1 year.
Okay.
Not during just spring training, thank God, because we finally hired a coach to coach during the season. So yeah, I was really blessed to have a wonderful career. I put 39 years in with the
39 years
with the Board of Education. Yes.
Okay.
I would have probably. I get asked all the time, why in the world didn't you stay for 40 years? Why just 39? Well, back in 08 and 09, that was when we had the recession, and the school board was giving you a little extra money to go ahead and retire. He wanted to get rid of us old heads, and so they gave you an incentive to retire. And I said, well, I'm going to be retiring pretty soon anyway. I might as well take their money and go home.
Okay.
So that's kind of, what I guess was the nail in the coffin for retirement. Okay. But I the kids is where it was. I really, really enjoyed teaching in the students.
Oh, well, Paul, I can see that. I mean, I could always see you as a teacher. You have such a humble, sweet spirit about you. You're very lovable, at least you are to me.
Better ask my wife that. I guess she thinks so.
And a lot smarter than you give yourself credit for. So I can believe that you would have a wonderful teaching career. Back when I was in school like you, my father never went to college, and I never had any plans to go to college. And from time to time, a teacher would come over in the lunchroom or something. I remember Miss Walker. She was always a very
Miss Walker.
a very concerned, gentle type teacher, and she was talking to me about college and where did I want to go to college, and I was like you. I was like a hum. But what would I do? The only people I knew that had been to college were school teachers.
Right. You're right, Lloyd. I
think
like
at that time that I wanted to be a school teacher. So to me, going to college was synonymous with being a school teacher. And then later I did go to college, after I went in the military and night school and things like that. But I wish, as I look back, I love to teach now. I teach at the local community college now, psychology, when I can get a class as adjunct. And, I've subbed a lot locally. And as I look back, that would have been for me a wonderful career. I wish I had an interest. One that I think I could have been like you are today. A lot of great memories, influenced a lot of kids. And I know that you've seen your influence, like Wayne McKay's influence on you, I'm pretty sure you've probably seen your influence make its way in other young lives. Can you think of any
That's
particularly
a number. Oh yes, I get wonderful feedback from my former students, and it's really heartwarming, and just makes you feel so good. And I've had tears in my eyes sitting talking to students that have come and told me the influence that I had on their lives. And what's just kind of so amazing is at the time you're doing it, you have no idea that you're making that influence. You just I was just doing what I felt like I need to be doing, and doing what I should be doing as a teacher and administrator or whatever. But yes, it is. It's a tremendous feeling to have a former student come up and tell you stories that you don't even remember, and they'll tell me things that occurred and happened that how they influenced. Matter of fact, I just said it. I serve on the city council of Robertsdale now, and the mayor of Somerdale now. I happened to sit. We had a little Chamber of Commerce thing, had a dinner and a luncheon, and a meal there. And so we were sitting there, and he said, he stopped. He said, "Mr. Hollingsworth, I just want you to stop a minute. I want to tell you something." And he sat there and told me about the influence that I'd had, and that he felt like that he's where he is today because of some of the things that I said and did. And he had some unique things in his life. His dad passed away early, and I took some extra time with him, and he took the time just the other day, and I'm proud of him. He's mayor of Somerdale, and
Wow.
done very, very, very well. And but it's just one example of how you can just be rewarded. The good Lord just really blessed me and put me in the right place at the right time, the way I feel.
Well, that was obviously a great career choice for you, Paul. Aside from just being a great guy, I mean, I know you again, you and I spent a lot of hours riding that school bus and counting the turtles at the creek on the log, and I've always considered Paul Hollingsworth to be one of my
I used to tell them on the
friends.
I'd have students that would get in trouble on the bus, and this bus driver would bring them to me, and I'd have to deal with them. But I always let them know, hey, I can assure you, you hadn't done anything or seen anything. I can figure out what's going on in that school bus. I've had plenty of experience with that. Oh gosh, you were telling about throwing the peeling or something out.
Yeah.
I remember some students throwing ice out and hitting a car, and that car, that lady that was driving that car, she was one more upset woman that came charging into my office, and so I had to go deal with that and figure out who did it and all that. So,
Paul, I remember on our school bus through the years, the older boys actually started this. Narverley Tullis and Narverley Seals and Leroy Tullis. They started these hitting games, and they carried on year after year after year. And every year we would do that. If you made a little circle with your finger, you'd get 2 licks, and you had to cross it before you hit and exit.
They'd hit you on the shoulder.
Hit you on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And I got a hit on you one time, and you jerked back as I was hitting you on the arm, and my fist glanced off your arm and hit you in the lip. Remember that?
I remember
it cut
that.
your lip
burst
pretty
my lip pretty good.
I think you had to go to the doctor and have it sewed up.
I did.
And I remember Miss Webb giving me a heart. Said, Lloyd Albritton, I can't believe you. She called us Mr. Mr. Hollingsworth, Mr. Albritton. I can't believe you beat up sweet little Paul Hollingsworth. I said, Paul's my buddy. I didn't beat him up. It was an accident. But sometimes we did get a little bit hurt from those games that we played.
Yeah. What was amazing about that incident, Lloyd, I remember very well. I pulled my shoulder. We had that little game, and it was your time to hit me on the shoulder, and then I shrugged my shoulder, and he glanced off and hit me. But what was amazing about how you and the other boys on the bus tried to protect me from my dad, because y'all knew that my dad was going to get on to me for being involved in the hitting. So y'all did your best to say, hey, we will take blame. We'll tell him this. I don't know if you remember that or not.
Kind of.
And but Dad wasn't that upset with it. He kept me on the bus and brought me up here to the old Green Line Hospital, and Dr. Wilson happened to be in there, and he took and sewed my lips up and sent me home. But I didn't get to go back to school. Daddy took me home, put me to work. I do remember that. So. Yeah, but that was part of the experiences that we had on the bus. Yes.
Now, Paul, farming. You grew up farming. Your father owned a pretty good bit of land, and you guys stayed busy. You never ran out of work, I wouldn't imagine.
Right.
I remember your brother Dwayne. Now, Dwayne, Eldred went to Kempstrand, and you became a teacher, and Thelma, of course, went to the telephone company. But I remember Dwayne, I think above all of you, used to say the last thing he was going to do was farm. He said, I'm going to go in the Air Force or something, but I am not. That's going to be the last thing I ever do. And he was the one of you that actually ended up farming.
He ended up being the farmer.
He ended up being the farmer.
I remember that, Lloyd.
I think that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But how did you feel? Now, you, since you've retired, you've had some land. Some of your father, I don't know how that all ended up, but I know you've done a little farming.
I inherited some of the land, yeah.
How do you feel about farming? I guess you call yourself more of a, since you got a retirement, you're more of a gentleman farmer now than being critical.
I do after, of course, while my whole career that's growing up and then becoming an adult, and I kind of stayed involved with farming with my dad. I would help him, and we kind of farmed together and whatever. And after retirement, I'm still, farming some of the land that I inherited, but it's more like almost like a hobby now.
Right.
To be real successful in farming this stage, you got to be a big farmer. You got to have a number of acres. It's all about having enough acreage because the profit margin is so small per acre, and the cost of putting in a crop with all the specialized equipment that you have to have nowadays. And so, but I still do it. I do it for, like I said, like a hobby. I enjoy it. I enjoy being out on a tractor, and it keeps me busy. Hopefully it keeps my health good. And so I don't know how much longer I want to do that. We're pushing 75 now. So
that's right.
It's about time I quit doing all that hard work. It's still hard work. I still use the tractors that I inherited from my dad. I bought one here or two there, but it's just enjoyable getting out there and seeing things grow and harvesting corn. And so, yeah. But I do want, before we finish, I want to mention, as growing up as kids as we were, the influence that my mom and dad and all of us, but particularly what I remember was church and how they made us go to church, and the influence that little old Antioch church had on me personally. My mom, was very influential, and my granddad and my dad's dad, and Andrew Hollingsworth, in his last years, he lived with us. And he was very religious. He read the Bible all the time. He wore out numerous Bibles, and I remember growing up, Lloyd, going out, and he had an old car that he parked out there that Daddy never would let him drive anymore, so it was more or less his little place to go and spend the day. He'd spend the day in that car, sitting in that car reading the Bible. And I'd go out there and had the most wonderful time visiting with him, and his conversation was always about the Bible and the interpretation in the Bible. And I tell people about how many times that I saw him and heard him. There was a gully down behind our house, and he would go down in that gully, and he would sit there and pray. You could hear him praying for hours in that gully, just praying and talking, and then the church and the influence it had. Those are the things that really.
I remember him well. In fact, your daddy had a barn just down near our house across the road.
Right.
And from time to time, he would have a sick cow. I'd hear him over in that barn all night long, over there praying for that cow.
He would. He would go pray for those cows.
Yeah.
He sure would all night. Thanks for that memory, but yeah, he sure would.
Yeah. Well, he was an interesting guy and come from an interesting family himself. I don't know all. Now Grady, your father's brother, married
Right.
my father's older sister Agnes.
Sure did.
So all of those Hollingsworths are my first cousins, and of course there was Roy, who also drove a bus, and there were a couple other brothers.
Bradley. There was one. There was Bradley.
Was there a Shirley?
No, Shirley would be a first cousin, but there was a Shirley, yes,
Okay.
but he wasn't a brother.
Okay. And they were all hardworking people, kind of had a kinship to the land.
It's amazing how hard work. Of course, everybody in that day were hard workers. I mean, they would turpentine. Do you remember that, Lloyd? About how they people, we would turpentine and you talking about hard work. They really did hard work.
They did.
Cleared up a lot of land and.
I heard your brother Eldred tell me one time, he said, my daddy, the cost of land today, it seems prohibitive that you can afford to buy the land, but my daddy acquired most of his land back during Depression years. Land was cheap, but dimes and nickels was precious as well.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. Land, and
it was probably just as hard, or may have been even more difficult, even though. The land was cheap compared to what, we knew it was then. But like you say, a nickel in those days was hard to come by.
Hard to get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It always amazed me that the students in later years, they'd be walking around the break area and a penny or a nickel or dime be laying on the ground, on the floor. And I would walk up I'd see one on there and I'd catch somebody, say, "Hey, Johnny," or whatever. I'd say, "Hey, Johnny," or "Are you gonna pick that up?" "No, sir, I'm not picking. I don't want." They didn't want to be seen picking up a penny or nickel, and I'd say, "Oh, that's all right then. I'll pick it up.
I'll take it."
Yeah, it's some wonderful times we've had, but.
Well, Paul Hollingsworth, one of my oldest and dearest friends. Always a pleasure to visit with you, whether we're doing a conversation on the air or not. And we just recently had a class reunion that was a great time.
Right.
So we got to saw some of our classmates. Thanks for participating and being a part of this.
Thank you for allowing me to do it, Lloyd. You've always been a great influence on me, and you continue to do so. And I truly enjoyed reminiscing on your program. God bless you.
God bless you, Paul. This is Lloyd and Friends Show signing out. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lloyd and Friends Show with Lloyd Overton.